Raging protests in Iran have claimed more than 24 lives over the past week. Angry over the death of a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, who was arrested for allegedly violating the hijab laws, massive demonstrations have erupted in large parts of Iran. Women have been at the forefront of the widespread protests, burning their hijabs, chopping off their hair, demanding justice, liberty and freedom from what they call gender apartheid. On one side are these unprecedented scenes of daring women up against the regime against mandatory hijab laws. On the other side, images of outrage by Muslim women in India demanding lifting of hijab ban in classrooms. Large-scale protests rocked the state of Karnataka and several other Indian cities a few months ago, with young Muslim women at the forefront insisting that by preventing Muslim girls from wearing the hijab to schools, the administration was putting their education in jeopardy. So images of resistance by women from two movements, one for hijab, the other against hijab. The question is, should it be a matter of choice? If yes, who can or should make that choice? That's the global debate. Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teena. Pleased to welcome on this edition of the Global Debate an illustrious panel of experts joining us from different cities across the world who will be discussing their perspective on the hijab debate globally. Pleased to welcome Mr. Hadi Gaimi. He is the founder and executive director of New York-based Center for Human Rights in Iran. Mr. Gaimi, thank you for your time. Welcome to Sansad TV. Also, a pleasure to have with us Mr. Koroush Ziabari. He is senior Iranian journalist and writer. Thank you, Mr. Ziabari, for your time. Welcome to this edition of the Global Debate. And Professor Zeenat Shaukat Ali, Director General, Wisdom Foundation, India. Professor, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. Mr. Gaimi, let me begin the program today with you. You know, what we are witnessing today in Iran, the images that are coming in from various cities of the country of daring women burning the hijabs, chopping off their hair, defying the strict hijab laws. It's one-of-a-kind movement that's never been seen before in Iran. How do you look at the entire protest building up? Is it just an emotional outpour over the death of Mahsa Amini, or a larger pushback against these mandatory hijab laws in Iran, which the women of this movement are now terming as gender apartheid?
Yeah, thank you for having me. No, this is not an emotional reaction to a short-term issue. This is something that has been brewing over decades. When hijab became mandatory right after the Islamic Revolution, already on that day, hundreds of thousands of Iranian women came to the streets in an iconic protest back in the spring of 1979, saying that hijab is a choice and should not be imposed as a political tool. And Iranian women's rights activists and groups have been advocating for gender equality for more than 2 decades. It's just that it has not resulted in much change, and because it really impacts half of the population. Women are half of any country's population, and we're seeing the women of Iran today have really reached their tipping point where they feel like their entire lives, and this is not just about wearing hijab in a public place. It's about employment, it's about child custody, it's about violence against women at home and other places. It's about honor killings. So by the death of Mahsa, I think every Iranian woman felt an obligation that she has to stand up because it could be her next. Today, Iranian families are asking, if my daughter, my sister, my mother leaves the house, would she come back alive? And what is really glaring is that of all the videos the government itself has published of Mahsa in the detention center, she is actually wearing quite a modest clothing, very long, for Iranian standards of today, very proper hijab. So it is also about political repression of women and their bodies becoming a battlefield for government repression.
Absolutely. And all of these aspects, the manner in which it's mobilized Iranian women today, it's led to a movement of sorts, Mr. Ziabari. What's your viewpoint? How do you look at the entire protest building up? Of course, as Mr. Gaimi said, it's not an emotional outpour. It's a representation of discontent, of dissent that's been brewing over decades, ever since the 1979 revolution. But does it indicate towards a transformation that has been waiting to happen in Iran?
Right. I see this protest movement as the culmination of several years, and particularly in the past year, of resentments against the government's decision to impose its desired lifestyle on women and the broader society. And since the hardline President Ibrahim Raisi came to power last year in a very uncompetitive election, he actually made it his mandate to reinvigorate the morality police, to dedicate further funding to the initiative for the promotion of vice and prevention of virtue. I mean, it was one of the hallmarks, and it continues to be one of the hallmarks of his administration, that further aggression against women is there. And we have been seeing several videos circulating on social media showing morality police confronting women on the streets using repressive forms of crackdown to correct their appearance, as they say. But I can say that this is simply backfiring, and this is actually leading to further grievances against the idea of hijab, the concept of hijab, the tradition of hijab. This is simply something that needs to be left to women to decide, the same way that the ban in India is counterproductive, depriving Muslim women of their freedom of choice. The same way coercion and imposition of a certain lifestyle in Iran is counterproductive, leading more young people to become hostile against the concept of hijab. So, I mean, this is also at the same time sowing divisions within the Iranian society, pitting different groups of people against each other. So the more traditionalist, religious-minded people are being pitted against the more secular-minded, liberal, urban, educated young Iranians who wish more freedoms in their day-to-day lives. And I understand this is simply not the jurisdiction and the authority of the government to intrude into people's choices, because it will have catastrophic ripple effects, reproducing social tensions. And as we see, this protest movement is not, an isolated incident. It's not an emotional response. It's a culmination of 1 year of people building their resentments and protesting online and on social media. Now they're seeing that a young woman has died because the government has mishandled and simply botched its response. I guess this is going to be a fault line if the government does not correct its mentality and its approach to the idea of hijab. If it doesn't stop actually deciding for people what to wear, how to live, what preferences, what lifestyles to adopt. And I guess we really need a reckoning, and this reckoning is happening. Maybe, in terms of long-term transformation, I'm not sure, because the government has made it clear that this is a battleground that it will not withdraw from. And this is a very unfortunate understanding that the government has made it a life and death urgency to pin its entire resources on women's dressing styles. But
absolutely,
I guess
you're right, Mr. Ziabari. The fact that it had to take the life of a young woman, a promising young woman's life, to actually bring to the fore this larger debate of hijab, the kind of laws that govern hijab in different countries, and the larger essence, Professor Ali, that it should be a matter of choice, the freedom of choice actually for the woman to decide whether or not to wear a hijab. But before we come to that aspect, two stark images that we've seen, one that we are witnessing in Iran, one that we saw a few months ago in the state of Karnataka, wherein Muslim women actually came on the streets to fight against lifting of the ban of hijab. They wanted the right to wear hijab to schools. So, groups of Muslim women, what we are witnessing today in Iran, they want to get rid of hijab. In India, we have groups of women who want to wear the hijab. similar movements, but, contrary demands. How do you look at the entire scenario, one that's building up in Iran and one that we are actually witnessing in India? The case is currently being heard in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is yet to give its judgment.
Thank you for inviting me to your show. The first thing I would like to say that this killing of this young girl, 22-year-old girl, has been brutal, is condemnable, deplorable, and absolutely unacceptable. So this kind of an infringement on her right to choose what she would like to wear, or to even, it has been condemned even by the people of Iran, Imam Khatami, the President Khatami, the previous president, and even clerics from Qom have said that this entire promotion of virtue and this something of vice department itself is a deviation from Islam. But having said that, I would like to say that in Iran, and there are two different situations. In Iran, I believe that history is being made. And the women over there are this time very determined. Unfortunate that this kind of oppression, suppression, and brutal attacks are coming. 31, I believe, have been reported to be dead, and this is something that cannot be encountered. And I do think there is going to be a major transformation, because I don't think the women are now going to take the back foot and be quiet. So this is a kind of a political movement that has been mentioned by our earlier panelists, that is brewing over the years, where they want to show their assertion, because Iran earlier, before 1979, women did not use this kind of a dress. There was no imposition for them to wear it. Mm-hmm. So I think Iranian women are moving towards making history, and I pray for them and wish that their desire should be fulfilled. As far as we are talking about India, I think there's a huge, big misunderstanding. The Constitution of India, one of the best in the world, has said that every man and woman has a right to choose and dress as they wish. So if a woman wants to wear a niqab, or she wants to wear a burqa, or she wants to wear a ghungat, or she doesn't want to wear it, it is up to her. What we are talking about now in the Supreme Court, the matter which has gone, is only relating to a school. It has been said that when a child goes to school, she up to the school gate, within the school premise, she's allowed to dress as she wishes. But once she comes into the class, then there has to be uniformity in the class. Mm-hmm. It has been said very clearly in the High Court judgment that there has to be no religious symbolism of any kind. You see, whereas Iran is basically an Islamic country having one culture, in India we have multiple cultures. So it was said that whether you wear a saffron scarf, or you wear a tilak, or you wear a cross, or whatever, because in a class you go to study, there has to be uniformity, there has to be equality. There has to be, whether you're rich or you're poor, or whatever your background, you've come there to study your sciences, your mathematics, your space sciences, your history or geography, or whatever you're studying, has to be done in a very neutral fashion, religion neutral fashion. Because religion somehow or the other is taking a different kind of a dimension than it is actually meant to invoke your spirituality and the best in you.
That's exactly, Professor. The argument here is the proponents of, who want the hijab ban actually to be lifted are arguing that it goes against the spirit of Islam. Now, in an Islamic Republic of Iran, where you're seeing women calling it, and a symbol of oppression, they actually want to liberate themselves and make the choice themselves. Here you have a group that actually says it goes against the spirit of Islam. Why is there a difference in the way Islam is being represented? What actually does Islam say about clothing for women? And does it actually mention it at all?
You see, I tell you, it's a very good question. And I just want you to know that, Islam has never introduced the veil. Let us start with that. 2005 years, 100 years ago, there was a culture within Arabia that existed. And the Prophet Muhammad, when the Quran was revealed to him, and this very word hijab, if I may say so, is mentioned 7 times in the Holy Quran, and in nowhere is it concerned women's clothing. It is mentioned in a metaphorical sense, and the best of dictionaries and lexicons have described it and translated it as curtain, a partition. So there is a verse of the Holy Quran which says there's a partition between human beings and God. There's a partition between good and evil. There's a partition between good people and bad people. And there is also a verse which says when Mary conceived, she left and she went to a temple and she sat in a particular place, with a curtain in between. Now, it is also mentioned, when Solomon was watching his horses run, he was very fond of horses, the night came in. So, when the night came in, the hijab came in between the day and the night. So, it is the day and the night and the hijab day. So, there is no such verse that a hijab is used for women's clothing. Let's start with that. The second point is that the word that is used in the Quran for clothing is jilbab, or it is khimar. Now, there was a dress that was worn by the elites of Arabia, where there was a sort of a veil, a cloth that went behind the back this way, and there was a jilbab or a dress which had a huge big slit in front, which exposed the private parts of a lady. And in the 5th year of the Prophet's revelation, and please note that this is not my interpretation, I am talking to you about Sayyid Amir Ali, about Muhammad Asad, about Abdullah Yusuf Ali, earlier with Imam Razi, with Zamat Shari. I'm talking about translators and interpreters of these verses right from early Islam to today. And it was said that, in the 4th or 5th year of Revelation, women used to go out to attend the offices of nature, and they also had to go to the marketplace to buy milk and food, etc. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they were attacked. And there was an incident when this lady went, and you see, the front part, her chest was exposed, and she was attacked, and it was said, we thought the men who had tried to rape her said that it was, it was because they thought that she was a woman of ill repute. They tried to cover themselves. But there was a law established that rape under Islam is punishable by death. And so now, because all this, it was said to the Prophet in Surah number 33, that when you go out, Muslim women, cover yourself in a fashion that will protect you, that will not allow people to say such things about you. And so you cover yourself and you go, but nowhere was any code of a dress mentioned.
Absolutely.
And so
whether you can impose it on every woman across the world is the larger concern here, Mr. Gaimi, and that it's amounting to human rights violations has become a bigger challenge today for the world to handle. So what we are witnessing today in Iran is something that perhaps if it goes unchecked could happen in any other Islamic republic. That's where a solution has to be found. There are courageous women today in Iran who've come against this authoritarian regime, but we know what's going to happen. The last time, there was a protest in 2009. The last time there was an internet shutdown in Iran, more than 1,500 people were killed. Now, with the internet again going, there's been a blackout, and there have been reports of several protesting women missing. What are your worst fears now?
Yes, indeed. We have seen that when the government shuts down the internet, it goes on a rampage of killings that then get hidden because we never can figure out the details. These days, social media is very essential for getting documentation and images out. And in Iran, there is no free press. Journalists are being rounded up and taken to jail if they want to cover this protest. So the people themselves are essential to have access to internet for their safety. And my worst fear is a Tiananmen moment in Tehran when the government will shut down the internet and repeat what it did in November 2019. And that is why it's so critical that we all be talking about it. And I wish world leaders would be telling the Iranian government that it should not kill people simply for protesting or wanting to challenge the hijab laws. So in that sense, we're in a very critical moment where a large-scale killing could be coming, just like in November 2019. But there's no question that there's a very big difference in this protest and the previous ones. In the previous one, when the riot police started shooting or bringing out water cannons and other methods of beating them and pushing them back, of course, it resulted in a lot of fear and people running away. what is amazing this time, even though the protests are, many of them are women, especially on the front line, they're being brave. They're being hopeful that they're empowered. They're not going back. In many images and videos, they're fighting back, taking over riot police and pushing them back. So even if a large-scale killing results, it will not be the end of it. But it would be very sad if we are all silent and don't put the Iranian government on notice that its entire international standing depends on how it treats its own people. Then we will see these cycles of violence till eventually 85 million people can win their legitimate rights against a small group of ruling elite who just want a status quo. Let me just also say the Iranian government, the current government, and stakeholders in Iranian politics are only interested in one thing, and that is the status quo and their economic wealth. They have become extremely rich. The economic disparities are huge. Middle class has completely lost its ability to survive. The working class is under tremendous pressure. And yet the government elite are doing extremely well, and they're looking for any excuse to show that they're willing to use maximum violence to hold on to their political and economic power.
Absolutely, that's right. Mr. Ziabari, if I could get your opinion on the fact that, what actually could happen in Iran. There have been similar protests in the past, but of course, the government has made attempts to quell those protests. Similar things are happening now. But as protests escalate, we are seeing and we're discussing how there are hundreds of courageous women at the forefront in Iran trying to create history, trying to get rid of these regressive laws against them. As a Middle East analyst, give us and our viewers a sense of, similar laws in the region, especially governing the Islamic republics, and the fact that, the kind of responses they've seen from women out there. Have there been similar protests, similar movements in other countries wherein women have tried to make attempts to, free themselves, liberate themselves of such oppressive laws? Or are Iranian women the first who are going to, create history and sort of try to end this gender apartheid?
So we nearly have 50 Muslim countries who are members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And other than Iran and Afghanistan under the Taliban, we don't have other Islamic governments that actually impose a hijab as the government's desired preference and government dictated lifestyle. So we have had Islamic governments that have recently started taking steps towards relaxing their hijab orthodoxies, including Saudi Arabia, which is a very conservative Muslim kingdom. But it doesn't really replicate the same pattern of behavior that we are seeing in Iran. Unfortunately, this is something that is troubling in a sense that the Iranian government, with the Iranian society with all of its diversity, with the ethnic makeup of several ethnic groups. We have got Iranian Arabs, Iranian Kurds, Iranian Azeris, and so many other minorities living together. And even though the society is religiously somewhat a monolith, we still have Iranian Christians, Iranian Jews, and Zoroastrians living in the country. So with all of its diversity, the fact that the government sees it expedient to actually introduce uniformity of lifestyle choices, it's deplorable. But I guess the Iranian society has got the potential to be able to become a society in which people with all of their differences and all of their variances can live together peacefully and can live together in harmony. And if the government really harnesses this luxury of diversity that exists in the society, it's able to see the benefits. It's a fallacy to believe that Iran is a monolith. It's definitely one of the most ethnically diverse, lingually diverse, religiously diverse societies. Iran is the birthplace of Zoroastrianism, the first monotheistic religion in the world. So I guess
What you're saying,
there is
Mr.
huge
Zabari,
potential.
sounds music to the ears in the current context where, thousands of women's lives are at stake in Iran. But with the current regime, whether that's possible is the bigger question. Professor Ali, I'll take one last question from you on the essence of the hijab debate globally. That's the freedom of choice that the woman has to make, and not just the hijab. Any decision that impacts women's lives and women's lifestyles across the world. So be it Iran, be it India, be it the United States of America, why can't women make their own choices? The choice to wear what they want, the choice to do what they want. And this I relate to the abortion law as well. So the United States of America, the country of the first world, not giving its women the right to decide whether they want to have their baby or abort the child. That's again one form of regression of repression against women. So when we look at the holistic picture globally, why can't women themselves have the right to make the choice?
I think it's $1 million question. Women have the right, and women should take that right. Now it's time that women have to rise, and they have to say, this is our right under the Constitution, and this is what we want. Unfortunately, you see, what you have pointed out is that element of patriarchy may be diminishing in some countries and more in others, but that element of patriarchy or domination, whether in domestic violence, whether in sexual harassment, whether in as you have said, reproductive rights, whether in disorders relating to to yourself, and to even to honor crimes. So you find this kind of gender oppression, which is very unjust or cruel, is an exercise of authority or power that is being used over them. And I think now their voices have to be heard, and the men also. I mean, the masculine and the feminine have to stand together for what they believe to be right. And so you cannot suppress the feminine all the time. And as far as the hijab is concerned, I want you to know that several Muslim countries cutting across the world have brought about a different law. In the 1970s, actually, the hijab began to reassert itself because, governments were under either the French or the English. So it became an identity it became an identity issue, that this is our identity, so hijab, and this is how we dress. But now the history has passed that stage. But today, as we see ourselves, you find that there are countries, I can name to you half a dozen countries, which do not permit the hijab to be worn in official institutions, some in government buildings, some in public spaces. So you have countries like Kosovo, like Azerbaijan, like Tunisia, like Turkey, who have partially lifted the veil as time goes, and there are other countries like Kyrgyzstan and other countries where they do not allow you to wear the veil at all. As a matter of fact,
absolutely, you're right. I think when we talk about institutions reflecting the 21st century reality, it's also important that the laws of the day, the rules governing people, have to also be updated with time. You cannot have a 1960 or a 18th century law governing the woman of today. And I think the bottom line of the debate today is, when it concerns women, when we talk about gender equality, what's important is not just to give them equal opportunities, but let them make their own decisions. And I think all of this, be it the hijab, be it the reproductive rights, there are multiple issues concerning women that individual countries are dealing with, where the choice, the right to make choice, does not lie with the woman. So a handful of men, a handful of organizations will be making decisions for their own. And until that happens, perhaps we will keep talking about gender oppression. So that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of the Global Debate today, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. Absolute pleasure to have you on the program today. So that's it from us on this edition of Global Debate today, viewers. Thank you very much for your time as well. I'll see you same time next week now with another topic. Until then, you take good care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.